The sirens came fast. Too fast. Malcolm had barely turned the corner when the blinding red and blue lights flooded his rearview mirror. He didn't speed, didn't swerve, didn't even touch his phone. Still, his hands instinctively gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The cruiser behind him didn't wait long. It swerved to block his car diagonally, driver's door flung open before the engine fully stopped. Gun drawn, voice barking. Out of the car, now hands where I can see him. Malcolm didn't move. Not because he was defiant, but because he'd been waiting for this moment. Welcome to A Story That Lingers. Before we continue, let us know in the comments, where are you watching? If these stories resonate with you, please hit that subscribe button to support the channel, because tomorrow we'll have another special story for you. It had been 2 weeks since Malcolm Hayes had arrived in Ashton, Missouri, a quiet middle American town most people only knew from maps or football scores. And for 2 weeks he had watched, quietly, carefully. As a federal oversight agent, discretion was part of the job. No suit, no badge on the belt, no tinted government SUV. Just a modest gray Nissan, a Columbia jacket zipped to the chin, and the calm, unassuming air of someone used to being underestimated. That night he wasn't surveilling anyone. He was on his way home from grabbing a sandwich after a long day of paperwork. No tail, no mission. Just a man trying to get back to his rental apartment before the rain came. But the lights found him anyway. He pulled over calmly, flicked on his hazard lights, and waited. A young officer ran toward the driver's side. No flashlight, no approach tactics, no standard procedure. Just a drawn weapon and an angry snarl. Step out of the vehicle. Malcolm took a slow breath, lowered his window halfway, and said softly, "Officer, I haven't done anything wrong." "Wrong answer." The cop's voice rose. "Don't play smart with me. I saw you roll that stop sign." Malcolm hadn't. There was no stop sign at that corner. But this wasn't about traffic law. He could feel it. He'd seen it too many times before. This was a fishing expedition, a show of force. The officer leaned in, scanning the interior. License and registration, hands on the dash. Malcolm complied, calmly, carefully. His hands moved like clockwork practiced. He knew the choreography by heart. It was the dance every black man in America knew how to perform when red and blue lights tainted the sky. The officer took the documents and stepped back. Another cruiser pulled up behind them. This one with Officer Brendan Kemp. Malcolm had read the complaints. 6 in total, 4 from black men, 1 from a Hispanic woman, 1 from a white father whose son had been shoved face first into concrete over a broken taillight. All marked resolved, none investigated properly. Tonight, Officer Kemp approached the car like he'd done it 1,000 times. He didn't look at Malcolm's license, didn't even greet him. He just sneered. "Middle of the night, you just driving around." Malcolm nodded once. "I picked up food." "Mind if I take a look in your car?" Malcolm hesitated, just for a breath. Officer Kemp grinned. "What's the problem? You got something to hide." Malcolm's eyes flicked up to the cruiser's dash cam. The red recording light was on. "Not at all," he said, "but I'd like to know what probable cause you have to search my vehicle." That was the moment the mood shifted. Kemp's voice grew cold. "You pulling legalese on me?" Malcolm didn't answer. Kemp yanked the door open. "Out." Malcolm stepped out slowly. The first officer, the younger one, stood nearby, now unsure, watching how this unfolded. Kemp motioned toward the back of the car. "Hands on the trunk." Malcolm complied. His eyes didn't leave Kemp's. He stayed calm. Still. This was what he came for. Not tonight, not this street, but this moment. The truth recorded in real time. Kemp searched the car, tossing napkins, containers, bags. Muttered something about smelling weed, even though there was no scent, no smoke, no nothing. The first officer shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Malcolm turned his head slightly, not enough to be seen as resisting, just enough to say quietly, "You're making a mistake." Kemp snapped. "You threatening me?" "No," Malcolm replied. "I'm warning you." Kemp stepped closer. His fingers twitched near the cuffs on his belt. Then the radio crackled. "Unit 7, stand down. Return to vehicle." A pause. "Now." Kemp froze. He looked at the younger officer, then at Malcolm, then back toward his cruiser. Malcolm didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched. Because that voice on the radio, it wasn't dispatch. It was Detective Lillian Shore, Internal Affairs Liaison, embedded in the state agency. And her voice meant one thing. The curtain was about to rise. Malcolm stood still, hands at his sides, now chin slightly lifted, as the cold night air wrapped around him like judgment. Officer Kemp's jaw twitched. He looked toward his cruiser where the radio voice had come from, then back at Malcolm. "You know her?" he asked flatly. Malcolm didn't answer. It wasn't a taunt. It wasn't silence for the sake of superiority. It was restraint, the kind you earn through years of watching men like Kemp fold under their own weight. The younger officer hovered near the passenger door, nervous now. His posture had changed. No longer aggressive, just confused. Like he suddenly realized they might be playing a game he didn't understand the rules to. Kemp sneered and waved him off. "Go sit in the car," he muttered. "I'll handle this." The younger cop hesitated, then retreated. The two men were alone. Street quiet, no traffic, no witnesses except for the blinking red eye of the dash cam and the weight of truth waiting to surface. Kemp stepped forward. "You think I'm scared of some pencil pusher from Internal Affairs," he hissed. "You think one little complaint's going to bring me down?" Still, Malcolm said nothing. He simply tilted his head toward the camera like a director cueing the next scene. Kemp's voice dropped lower. "Let me tell you something, pal. Around here, we don't take kindly to people trying to play the system. You think you're going to walk in, start some crusade, ruin a man's life because you caught a little attitude on a traffic stop." His breath fogged in the night air. Malcolm finally spoke. "This wasn't a traffic stop." Kemp laughed bitterly. "No, then what is this?" Malcolm's eyes locked onto his, calm, unblinking. "This is a report, writing itself." Kemp's jaw clenched. And then he snapped again. "Turn around, hands behind your back." Malcolm didn't move. That small refusal, the quiet resistance, burned hotter than any shouted insult. "I said." "You don't want to do this," Malcolm said, voice level. "Not tonight." Kemp pulled his cuffs, stepped forward. Malcolm didn't fight. He turned slowly, placed his hands behind his back. Fingers relaxed as though he'd rehearsed this moment in his mind for years. In a way, he had. The cold metal clicked around his wrists. Kemp shoved him forward against the car hood. "Where's your ID now?" Kemp muttered. "You think that voice on the radio saves you?" Malcolm exhaled through his nose. No struggle, no panic. And still, no fear. Because the fear had been spent a long time ago. Back when he was 16, kneeling on gravel with a flashlight in his face. Or 22, cuffed on the sidewalk while his classmates walked past in silence. No, fear had no place here anymore. Only purpose. Kemp opened the back door of his cruiser and roughly guided Malcolm in. Malcolm sat, upright, silent. And then, as if summoned by fate, a black SUV turned onto the street and pulled up behind the second cruiser. Two figures stepped out. One a white woman in a dark pantsuit, hair pulled back tight, badge clipped at the waist. Detective Lillian Shore. The other tall, older, wearing plain slacks and a windbreaker. Lieutenant Doyle, Kemp's superior. Kemp's face drained of color the moment he saw them. "What the hell is this?" he said, walking toward them. Shore ignored him. She moved straight to the back of the cruiser and opened the door. Malcolm stepped out calmly. She offered no apology, no acknowledgement of the cuffs. Instead, she spoke with the kind of controlled authority that turns silence into a weapon. "Remove the cuffs," she said. Kemp didn't move. Lieutenant Doyle stepped in. "Brendan, now." The key fumbled in Kemp's hands. Malcolm rubbed his wrist briefly when the cuffs came off. He looked straight into Shore's eyes. A silent nod passed between them. Kemp stared between them, piecing it together, slowly, painfully. "Wait, what is this?" he asked. "What the hell is going on?" Shore turned to face him, arms crossed. "You just detained a federal oversight agent in the middle of an unauthorized stop. You conducted a vehicle search without probable cause. You failed to log your body cam, and your dash cam is recording a clear use of intimidation and coercion." Kemp's mouth opened, closed, no words came. Doyle sighed deeply. He looked like a man watching the structure of a house crack down the center. Kemp shook his head. "This is bullsart. He never said he was." "He didn't have to," Shore said. "You didn't ask." Silence. Kemp tried to recover. "You think you can just roll into my town pretending to be some average Joe and catch people slipping?" "No," Malcolm said quietly. "I didn't pretend. You just never asked who I was. You assumed." Shore turned to Malcolm. "We've recorded enough," she said. "The rest can wait until the debrief." He nodded. Kemp stood frozen, and for the first time in a long time, he had no script to follow. Because men like him were used to writing the narrative. But tonight, someone else held the pen. They let Malcolm ride in the black SUV. The doors closed with a soft, official thunk, the kind of sound you don't notice unless you spent your life hearing doors slam in your face. Detective Lillian Shore sat beside him in the backseat, notepad on her lap, voice recorder in her coat pocket, though neither were in use. Not yet. The driver was silent. The SUV moved smoothly through the sleepy town, past shuttered diners and gas stations, humming with fluorescent indifference. Midnight in Nowhere, USA. Euclid Shore finally asked, her tone clipped but not cold. Malcolm nodded. I've been worse. She almost smiled, almost. You let him cuff you, she said, turning slightly toward him. He shrugged. Some stories write themselves better from the inside. That could have gone a lot worse. As before. There was silence between them again. Comfortable, if only because it was shared by two people who'd spent their careers swimming in uncomfortable truths. Shore opened the center console, pulled out a file, and handed it to him. Your official review begins tomorrow, but you should see this. Malcolm opened it. Photos, reports, complaints. A list of names, civilians, former officers, even a city clerk, all tied directly or indirectly to Officer Brendan Kemp. Use of force, missing audio footage, a suspicious transfer of a young black officer who had filed a grievance and was later let go due to conduct. I started digging after your last message, Shore said. Your hunch was right. He's been protected for years. Quiet settlements, shuffled reports. A brother-in-law in city council didn't hurt either. Malcolm flipped through slowly. This wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. Proof. He's been escalating, she continued. Targeting drivers more frequently in low-income areas. Traffic citations have nearly tripled in his beat alone this year. Mostly black and Latino drivers. Malcolm's jaw clenched. Pattern with a badge. And immunity, Shore added, until tonight. The SUV pulled into a motel, a clean, anonymous roadside chain. Not glamorous, but safe. Stay here until morning, she said. We'll coordinate the official report. His suspension goes into effect at 7 a.m. The IA team rolls in at 8. Malcolm stepped out, took the folder. Paused. You still think this changes anything, he asked. Shore tilted her head. Not everything, but something. He gave a nod. That's enough. She didn't try to convince him otherwise. As he walked toward the motel room, the folder under his arm felt heavier than it should have. Because it wasn't just filled with paperwork. It was filled with faces. The motel room was simple. One lamp, one bed, one chair. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out his phone. There was a message from earlier, unopened. Call me if you're still coming Sunday. Eliza. He didn't open it. Not yet. His mind wasn't there. It was still back on that cold, dark street, the reflection of red and blue lights in the car window. The click of handcuffs around his own wrists. He stared at the cuffs in his mind longer than he'd stared at the real ones. Because this time, he'd let it happen, deliberately. And that haunted him, not because of shame, but because of recognition. When you've been on the receiving end of force, you don't forget the weight of those cuffs. You don't forget how steel can feel like silence pressed against your skin, like the hands of history itself. He lay back, eyes on the ceiling. Tomorrow would come. The report would be filed. The headlines would dance around allegations and pending investigation. But tonight belonged to those who'd been stopped before him. The next morning, Malcolm stood in the motel parking lot, coffee in hand. Shore pulled up again, this time in an unmarked sedan. Ready, she asked. He sipped. I've been ready since 1997. They drove in silence. This time not to a station, but to a church. Small brick with a fading wooden sign that read, St. James Baptist, all are welcome. Inside, rows of folding chairs were already filling. A community meeting. But not just any. This one was organized by Voices United, a coalition of local residents who had grown tired of waiting for justice. Malcolm walked in, folder in hand. He scanned the faces. Elders, teens, mothers, ex-officers. Formerly incarcerated men who still bore the bruises visible and invisible of the system. And somewhere in the second row, Malcolm spotted someone he hadn't seen in over a year. Andra Miller. The teenager who had once been slammed face first into a sidewalk by Kemp for allegedly resisting. No charges had ever been filed, but a permanent scar curved over his right eyebrow. Andre looked at Malcolm, gave the smallest nod. It meant everything. Shore stepped up to the front, addressed the group with precision, careful to stick to what was confirmed. Then she passed the mic to Malcolm. He didn't take the podium. He simply stepped forward and stood before them. "My name is Malcolm Hayes," he said. "I work for Internal Affairs, and last night I was stopped by Officer Brendan Kemp. No reason given, no protocol followed, and for the second time in my life, I had to choose between fear and proof." A hush fell over the room. "I let him put the cuffs on," Malcolm said, "because I needed him to show who he really was without knowing who I was." He held up the folder. "Inside here are the names of 18 individuals who were silenced, threatened, or pushed out. People like Andre, people like you, people like me. That ends today." A small clap, then another. Then the room erupted. But Malcolm didn't smile. Because this wasn't a celebration. This was the first page of something new. And he had no illusions about how long the story would be. Andre didn't speak at first. He just stood near the back of the church after the meeting, hood pulled halfway over his head, fingers nervously tugging at the frayed sleeves of his sweatshirt. His body was lean, too lean, like someone who'd been taught to take up as little space as possible. Malcolm approached slowly the way you do when you don't want someone to run. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice soft. "You remember me?" Andre nodded. "You were the one who told me to file a report." "I did," Malcolm said. Didn't matter. There wasn't anger in his voice, not anymore. Just resignation, like a kid who'd finally stopped believing in superheroes. Malcolm sat on the edge of a chair beside him. "You were right," he said, "about everything. And I didn't follow through like I should have. That's on me." Andre looked at him, one eyebrow raised. "Cops don't usually say that." Malcolm smirked. "I'm not exactly usual." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the quiet buzz of the community trickling out. Lillian Shore passed by and gave Malcolm a nod. Andre noticed. "She's cool. She's the one who believed me when I said your story was real." Andre exhaled through his nose like he didn't quite know what to do with that. Then, without being asked, he lifted his hood. The scar ran in a faint, angry line from the top of his right eyebrow down to his cheekbone. It had faded slightly with time, but not with memory. "I was 15, Andre said, walking home with my earbuds in. He pulled up and said I fit a description. I didn't even know he was talking to me at first." He paused. "By the time I took the earbuds out, he had me against the ground." Malcolm's fists clenched in his coat pockets. He remembered the photo in the file, the one taken at the hospital just before Andre was discharged, without so much as an apology. "I had nothing on me," Andre continued, "but I still got labeled uncooperative. School treated me like I was radioactive after that. Friends ghosted. My mom cried for 3 days straight, told me to just keep my head down from then on." "You shouldn't have had to," Malcolm said quietly. Andre shrugged. "I know, but now I just want him to see what he did. I want him to see me, not just a report." Malcolm pulled something from his coat, a copy of the deposition summary Shore had printed. "Then help us finish this," he said. "We've got enough to bring him down, but your voice adds power to the truth." Andre looked at the papers, then at Malcolm. "What if he comes for me again?" "He won't." "You can promise that." Malcolm paused. "No," he admitted, "but I can promise he won't do it in the dark anymore. Not with the whole town watching." Andre nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, "then let's make some noise." 3 days later, the community center was packed. Cameras, reporters, families, former officers. Even the mayor, who stood near the back with a guarded expression. Malcolm stood at the podium with Shore and Andre behind him. "Today," Malcolm began, "we present the findings of an internal investigation that exposes not just one man's abuse of power, but a system that allowed it to thrive unchecked." He listed the names, the citations, the patterns. And then he stepped back, letting Andre take the mic. The room fell into a hush again. Andre's voice was steady. "When I got this scar, I thought it was the worst day of my life," he said. "But now I know it was the beginning of something bigger. It wasn't my fault, and it's not my shame to carry anymore." He held up a copy of the complaint he'd filed. This time the words weren't redacted. They were bold, unflinching. "He tried to silence me," Andre said, "but today I get the last word." The room erupted again, but it wasn't chaotic. It was purposeful. Hopeful? Like a door had finally opened. Outside after the press conference, Malcolm walked with Shore to her car. "You did good," she said. "So did you. Think this sticks." Malcolm looked out at the crowd still lingering near the doors, exchanging stories, hugs, handshakes. It better, he said, because this time we're not just leaving it to policy. We've got people. Shore opened her door but paused. By the way, she said there's a woman named Eliza who's left you 2 voicemails. She sounded patient but persistent. Malcolm chuckled. She's always been both. You should call her. I will. Shore smirked. Before or after you get back to work? He looked around. I think this is the work now. Later that evening, Malcolm finally sat down and called Eliza. Her voice picked up on the second ring. Took you long enough. I know. You okay? Getting there. There was a long silence. I saved you a seat, she said finally, at Sunday dinner. Malcolm smiled. I think I'm ready to come back. Malcolm stood in the doorway of his childhood home, uncertain if he was more nervous or just tired. The scent hit first garlic thyme, slow-roasted chicken. It smelled like home, like Sundays from another lifetime. Malcolm. He turned. There she was. Eliza had her hair tied back in a frizzy bun apron covered in flour. The kind of flour that meant she'd made biscuits by hand, the kind his mother used to make before arthritis claimed her wrists. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said. He stepped in slowly, eyes adjusting to the warm light, the flicker of candles, the chatter of cousins and uncles from the kitchen, the same old table, the same old chairs. Only one seat was noticeably empty. Dad's not here. She shook her head. Told me he'd come when you were ready. That's backwards. Maybe, but he's stubborn. You know that. Malcolm gave a small smile. Wonder where I get it from. Dinner was slow at first. Malcolm didn't talk much, mostly listened. To Uncle Ray's stories, to his cousin Renee talk about her new teaching job, to his aunt asking if he was still eating enough greens. But there was laughter, real laughter. And then after most plates were cleared, Eliza sat beside him and gently nudged his shoulder. Come talk to me in the kitchen. He followed. The kitchen was a mess of pans and crumbs, the kind of chaos that comes from cooking with heart. She poured 2 cups of tea, set them on the counter. You never told me what happened, she said softly. After Mama passed, you just left. Malcolm stared at the steam curling from his cup. I thought I had to do something, fix something. I couldn't fix her, couldn't fix us. You thought leaving would fix you. He didn't answer. Eliza reached over and took his hand. I blamed you for a long time, she admitted, but I think I blamed you because I missed you. He looked up, eyes wet. I missed you too, he said. Later that night, Malcolm found himself back in his old room. The posters were gone. The bed had a new comforter, but the creaky floorboard near the window still made that familiar sound when you stepped on it. He sat down, pulled out his phone, and looked at the text from Shore. Tomorrow's council meeting is at 9. I want you to speak. Daniel's just tried to call in a favor. He's scared. That's a good thing. He put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. What would his mother have said? Would she be proud? The next morning, the town council room was tense. Officer Daniel sat near the back wearing a stiff expression that said, I don't belong here, even though clearly he did. Shore opened with facts, timeline of complaints, chain of ignored warnings, budget shifts that quietly padded Daniel's department without accountability. And then she called Malcolm up. He stood notes in hand, heart pounding. I grew up in this town, he began. I loved it. Then I feared it. Then I tried to forget it. But people here deserve to be heard, not police-like problems. You know what made me want to be a cop? My mom. She said a badge should mean you serve, not scare. But we forgot that. Or maybe we let people like Daniels make us forget. He turned to the crowd, gaze sweeping past familiar and unfamiliar faces. We can't unhurt the people who've been hurt, but we can change what happens next. We can hold people accountable. We can listen. And if we do, this town could be something better than it was before, something braver. He stepped down. The room was silent for a beat, then applause. Not thunderous, but meaningful, like the town was waking up. That night, Malcolm found a letter slipped under his apartment door. Typed, no signature. You think being loud makes you right? It doesn't. You and that scar-faced kid are both liars. People like me built this town. People like you just break it. No return address, no name. Just cowardice. Malcolm stared at it, folded it once, then burned it in the sink. Because fear wouldn't win this time. The next morning, Shore called. You ready to hear the vote? Malcolm nodded, phone pressed tight. Unanimous, she said. Daniels is stripped of his badge. Investigation goes public. He'll likely face criminal charges. Malcolm exhaled. And you, she asked. I think I might finally sleep tonight. Later he visited the cemetery. The sky was gray, soft drizzle misting the air. He brought daisies, his mom's favorite. Hey, Ma, he said, we did it, or we're doing it. You always said truth was heavier than silence, but I'm learning it's also louder. He looked out over the rows of graves. I wish you'd met Eliza's new daughter. She's got your eyes. A breeze rustled the leaves. Malcolm stood in the rain quiet. Not alone. Not anymore. The day Officer Daniels was formally indicted, something shifted in town. It wasn't celebration, it was heavier than that. It was a sigh of long-awaited reckoning. The paper ran the headline, Officer Suspended Amid Abuse Allegations. But Shore has always said it better, not suspended. Exposed. Malcolm had barely set foot outside when an elderly man waved him down from his porch. Malcolm Grant. He nodded. I knew your mother, the man said. She taught me how to braid my daughter's hair. You're doing her proud. Malcolm smiled. Sometimes justice echoed louder in whispers than in gavel strikes. He was pouring coffee at the diner when Shore texted him. You should hear this. Come by City Hall, Room B. When Malcolm arrived, there was a small group, just 6 people. They weren't council members or reporters, just townsfolk, all with worn hands and tired eyes. Shore stood at the front and nodded at Malcolm. This is Malcolm Grant, she said. The reason we're still here fighting? A woman raised her hand timidly. I wasn't going to say anything, but I remember Daniels coming to my house when my son was 14, claimed he fit a description, slammed him against the porch post in front of me. My boy peed himself from fear. Another man spoke. He used to park outside my store, every Friday, just sit there, like he was waiting for me to mess up. More stories poured out, quiet, devastating. Malcolm realized this wasn't a meeting. It was a beginning. He and Shore stayed behind to clean up after everyone left. You think any of that will hold up in court, he asked. Shore shrugged. Maybe not all of it, but it's not about just the court. It's about truth. It stacks, like bricks. Malcolm nodded. You ever feel like it'll never be enough? All the time, she said. But then I remember Daniels wanted people too scared to talk. And look at us now, talking. A week later, Malcolm stood again before the council. This time not as a witness, but as a nominee. The mayor, a stern woman named Halverson, tapped her notes. We've reviewed the letters, the endorsements, your record. I'll be frank, Mr. Grant, you've stirred the waters more than anyone has in recent years. Malcolm swallowed. But sometimes that's exactly what stagnant water needs, she said. We'd like to offer you the role of civilian oversight chair. The vote was 6-1. He blinked. Seriously? She smiled. It's a thankless job. It pays next to nothing, but it comes with one hell of a responsibility. I'll take it. The new role changed things. Not everything, but enough. Malcolm helped launch a hotline for civilian complaints, sat in on town hiring interviews, advocated for trauma-informed training in the force, and most importantly, he listened. He listened to old men who'd never spoken before, to mothers with trembling hands, to teenagers with eyes hardened by fear. Some cried, some raged, some laughed bitterly. He listened anyway. One day after a long evening filing reports, Malcolm walked out into the twilight and found someone waiting on the courthouse steps. A teenager, tall, wiry hoodie pulled tight. Name's Devin, the boy mumbled. I heard you talk at school. I think I want to help. Help how? I don't know. Maybe we pass out flyers, run errands, just be part of something. Malcolm smiled. All right, Devin, we'll start small. You free Saturdays? The boy nodded, eyes lighting up. Malcolm thought, this is it. This is the shift. At home, Malcolm started writing again. Not reports, not notes. Letters. To his mother, to Shore, to a boy named Eric whose bruises had sparked a fire. He never sent them, just folded them one by one and placed them in a box labeled, For the Days I Forget Why I Started. Because some days would come like that, slow gray, thankless. But he'd remember. One afternoon as summer leaned toward fall, Malcolm was walking past the community center when he saw a familiar face. Eric. Older, taller, still quiet, but his eyes, they looked brighter. Eric was painting a mural, part of a new youth program Shore had helped fund. The mural was of the town skyline, but behind it stood silhouettes of people arms, linked backlit by gold and orange. Hey, Malcolm said. Eric turned wiped sweat from his forehead. Mr. Grant, you painted all this. Eric nodded. It's beautiful. Eric smiled. I didn't know I could do stuff like this. You always could, Malcolm said. You just needed someone to remind you. Eric looked back at the mural. You think people will actually change? Malcolm followed his gaze. I think they already are. That night, Malcolm visited Shore's office. She was packing a box. You leaving? She grinned. Promotion, state level. They want me to train other oversight boards. Big loss for us. Only if I don't leave the place in good hands. She handed him a folder. You're it, Malcolm, full-time director. You earned this. He held the folder like it might break. I don't even know what I'm doing half the time, he said. None of us do, she replied. We just do it anyway. Before she left, she gave him one last piece of advice. You want to keep a town honest? Don't just hold up a mirror. Build windows. Let them see what else they could be. He never forgot that. And in time, the town didn't either. The mural was finished by the end of summer. Painted across the brick wall behind the community center, it stretched nearly 30 feet, bold, radiant, defiant. At its center was a young boy with a bruise under his eye, holding the hand of a tall man with tired shoulders. Around them, people of all ages stood united arms, linked eyes open. In the sky above them, a single phrase curved like a banner. We see you. We hear you. We stand with you. Eric signed it in small white lettering in the corner for those who never got to speak. On the day of its unveiling, Malcolm stood silently among the crowd, his hands folded in front of him, watching people take it in. Some gasped, some wept. An old man whispered to his grandson, "That's what hope looks like." A young girl pointed to the child in the middle and said, "He looks like me." And somewhere behind Malcolm, a voice muttered, "It's about time." He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. After the ceremony, Malcolm stayed behind to help clean up. Eric was folding chairs when he said, "You ever think people only care when it's loud?" Malcolm looked at him. "Loud gets attention," he said. "But quiet is where the work lives. Quiet is the grandmother telling her truth for the first time. Quiet is a boy picking up a paintbrush instead of a brick." Eric nodded slowly. "I get that." "You did more than get it," Malcolm said. "You gave people a reason to remember it." Later that night, Malcolm walked through town, past the diner, past the courthouse, past the place where he'd first stood holding a photograph and a trembling heart. So much had changed. Daniels was gone. Shore had moved on. But the town had not gone back to sleep. People spoke up now. People listened. Not everyone, not perfectly, but enough. Malcolm stopped outside the park and took a seat on a bench. The moon hung low, bathing the playground in soft silver. And there across from him sat a mother rocking her child gently in her arms. He smiled. She nodded back. He pulled out the box he always carried, the one marked, "For the days I forget why I started." Inside were dozens of letters now, each one written after a hard day or a breakthrough or a silence broken. He opened the one he'd written the night Daniels was arrested. "Dear Mom, today." The town took a breath it's been holding for years. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a song. It was just a breath. But it was ours. He read it again, and then added a new one. "Dear Eric, you didn't ask to be the start of this story, but you were. Not because of what happened to you, but because you refused to let it be the end. Thank you for showing us the cost of silence and the power of being seen." Weeks passed, then months. And every now and then, someone new would knock on Malcolm's office door. A mother, a student, a retiree with a memory too heavy to carry alone. And every time, Malcolm would rise from his chair, set down his pen and say the same thing. "Come in, tell me everything." Because in this town now, someone was always listening. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone who spoke up when it mattered, or someone who needed someone to listen, take a moment to share this with them. Or with someone who needs to know that one voice, one truth, one act of courage can change everything. And if you believe in stories that reveal the heart, that open eyes and stir the soul, subscribe. Because more voices deserve to be heard, and more stories like Eric's, like Malcolm's, like yours deserve to be told.